SE 350, Lecture 1, Introduction, Operating Systems, Security. So, one of the first things we would do if we actually were to be in a classroom would be to look over the highlights, the class syllabus, all that kind of stuff, and this would be in Learn. There is a distinct possibility that you are watching this video in a term other than the one in which this was originally published, in which case you should of course be referring to the most up-to-date syllabus, i.e. the one that's published for that term, and therefore to try to help the videos be a bit more evergreen, I don't really intend to go over all of that again right now. With that said, it is still important. It contains lots of things you need to know about lecture topics, grading scheme, contact information, university policies, all that. So please, if you didn't attend a lecture where we talked about it, pause the video and take a look at it before we go on. Another important note, this course assumes that you have enough knowledge of C that we don't have to spend time going over it. If this is an area of difficulty for you, the beginning of term is the very best time to work on it. Just about everything that I think we will need will be covered in the first topic of another course that I teach, EC252, and you can find that on GitHub and YouTube. Just look for the one called RC Toolkit, well, that's the lecture or the video, and that should cover everything that you need if you would like a quick refresher about C. Another important note, the source material for the notes and slides is open source via GitHub. If you find an error, if you have an improvement, I appreciate you reporting it as an issue, or if you know enough about LaTeX to fix it, then you can submit a pull request, merge pull request, and that would be appreciated, because yeah, you will find mistakes, I will catch mistakes, and I will probably call attention to them in the slides. So your contribution is appreciated. Okay, preliminary stuff out of the way. We'll talk about an introduction to operating systems. And here's a quotation from 1980, so practically ancient history at this point, that says, operating systems are those programs that interface the machine with the applications programs. The main function of these systems is to dynamically allocate the shared system resources to the executing programs. There's more to the quote, and if we look in the notes, we'll see that there's stuff about the interface with adjacent levels, shifts with time, functions that were originally part of the operating system have migrated to the hardware, and things that used to be extraneous, that is provided by other application software, are now included in the operating system. But it's the shorter version here that we're really interested in. The main function of the system is to manage these resources such that the programs that want to execute will be able to accomplish their goal. And we'll see some more of that as we go through this topic. And yeah, why is it important? I mean, operating systems matter. They are sitting there in between the hardware and the application programs that you're running. And yeah, although I would describe myself as not at all likely to recommend Windows 10 to a friend or colleague, Linux users generally are very likely to recommend their preferred operating system, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, the thing about the operating system is it is complicated, right? It does a lot of different things, and it has many different goals. And those goals can sometimes conflict with one another, right? Fairness and efficiency, for example, are goals that potentially have some conflicts. It may be maximally efficient to do things in a way that's unfair. However, users might not like that. They probably don't appreciate having to wait longer for their program to run or to get the resources that they need. And so the operating system is going to have to make some choices, and sometimes those choices make some people mad. So its job, in this sentence being the operating system, is to make it so that other programs can run efficiently. It's providing an environment for them, and it's collecting and reporting data about what is happening, what has happened, and it also has to enforce policies that are set up by system administrators. And we'll take a quick look here at sort of a little diagram of what's going on. And up at the top, we have our application program. So this is PDF viewer that you're using, or web browser when you're watching a video. And below that, there are some libraries and utilities, and below that there is an operating system. And the goal of the operating system is really to provide this functionality, make a platform for which the libraries and application programs are designed, and make things work. And underneath all of that, there is all of the hardware. There's execution hardware, system interconnect, I/O devices, memory, all that kind of stuff. And it's all important. And to some extent, we could pretend we don't care about any of the hardware because of the existence of the operating system when we write a regular program. If, however, we want to write an operating system, or at least understand how one works, we're going to need some understanding of the underlying hardware. Otherwise, this isn't going to go well. So we may or may not have discussed in great detail some computer architecture in previous courses. Some of that is going to be important in terms of understanding why certain things are the way they are and how we should evaluate options. Now, as I said, the operating system is responsible for the resource management and allocation of those same resources. Resources like CPU time and memory space are limited, although you can say, well, with enough CPU and enough memory, these things are basically unlimited. For all practical purposes, that may be the case. However, the same area of memory can't be used by two processes at once, unless they've chosen to share it for some reason. So we still have to manage this resource, right? The parking lot might have 10 times the number of parking spots we could ever need. However, there's got to be some system that figures out, well, this parking spot is taken, so we can't have it. The operating system similarly must decide how to allocate these resources and keep track of them, keep track of who owns what, and perhaps even how long they've had it. And in the event of conflicting requests, the operating system has to choose the winner. When two processes want to print at the same time, well, someone has to decide who goes first. And that thing falls to the operating system. And really, the goal of the operating system should be that you don't notice it. Windows tries to upsell you on different things sometimes, but realistically, the primary function of the operating system should be invisible. And that is enabling your useful programs, like you want to use Photoshop or you want to use Word. Those are the main things that you came to the computer for. Linux enthusiasts aside, you probably didn't come to the computer today with the explicit goal of, I really want to tinker with settings in my operating system. You probably came with an objective like, I need to study for an exam, or I need to write an assignment, or I just want to watch a cooking video. Those are really the things that the operating system is supposed to be supporting, and part of the way that it does that is abstracting away the details of the hardware so that program authors, you made the web browser, you make the PDF viewer, you make the video editor, you make whatever user program it is, doesn't have to care about the specifics of the underlying hardware. And that's generally what we want, because that makes it a lot easier, and it's a lot more likely that whatever system you use will be able to have useful programs run on it. Imagine how painful it would be if you had to write Hello World differently for different hardware because, this has a different CPU, and this has a different memory architecture. That would be kind of annoying, right? You would end up wasting a lot of effort that you shouldn't really have to, right? We just want to do a very simple thing. Why should this be so difficult? Similarly, if you wanted to buy a computer, do you want to have to shop for computers with a comparison list where you say, well, here are the 10 programs that I think I'm going to run, and I have to make sure that the programs and the hardware are all compatible? Probably not. You're probably much happier with the idea of, you buy a laptop and you're pretty sure whatever you want to run will run. Now, in most cases, there are multiple programs running at the same time. We'll talk on occasion about some edge cases where there are micro machines that are dedicated to doing exactly one task or something like that. They're pretty rare. Realistically, all computers that we are going to talk about have multiple programs that are running at the same time, and that means some resources are necessarily shared, and that is, as you will imagine, a source of conflicts. right? Sharing is good, but sometimes we don't want to share. Sometimes we want a thing, and the operating system has to create and enforce the rules such that every process can get along. But sometimes processes really do want to share. They really do want to cooperate, and the operating system can help them to do that as well. Another goal for the operating system I mentioned already was the idea of efficiency. So another objective might be, how could we use the computer hardware that we have as much of its full potential as possible? This isn't really a thing in like a desktop operating system. The goal of the desktop operating system is to do whatever you tell it to do. But if you have a supercomputer here, a supercomputer like this costs an absurd amount of money to build, and costs also quite a lot of money to run and maintain and all of that. And you sell the time, if you own this thing, to various applications. So a university wants to do a particle physics simulation or something, you sell them supercomputer time. Well, if you are not using the time efficiently, that's money that you're wasting. So it might be a goal of the operating system to make sure that we are just maxing out the CPUs as much as possible, to make sure that we are earning the maximum potential money with the hardware that we have. It's a potential goal. And when you get an operating system, right? You get a new Mac laptop and it has Mac OS installed on it, and it comes with a bunch of things. It comes with web browser, Safari. It comes with a mail client. It comes with a text editor. All of those things. They ship with the operating system, but they're not really a part of the operating system, right? They are necessary. They are useful. You wouldn't want to have a computer that didn't have those things, but they're not really the part of the operating system that we're going to focus on. The part of the operating system we're talking about in this course is referred to as the kernel. The kernel, sometimes the core, is the main part of the operating system. It's the portion of the operating system that's always present in main memory. It's the central part that makes it all work. If you're familiar with the work of Linus Torvalds, his contribution, if you will, to making the operating system is, well, the Linux kernel. And on occasion we'll talk about Linus and his various contributions and his occasionally noteworthy, let's call them rage outbursts. So the kernel is really our focus. There's not too much that we're going to talk about that's outside of that. Operating systems will evolve over time. There will be new hardware that is released, new types of hardware, things that didn't exist before. Once long ago, like webcams did not exist, and then one day, they were invented. And there will be new services added, and there will be bug fixes. So there is going to be necessarily some evolutionary change, and I just mentioned Linus being angry, and here he is, surprise, because the evolution is constrained. There is a very strong need to maintain compatibility for programs. If a user updates their desktop operating system and a program breaks, even if it's the program author's fault, the user blames the operating system vendor, right? You upgraded from Windows 10 to 11 and now you can't run whatever game. You're mad at Microsoft, not the game developers. If we look at Windows, there's a pretty strict devotion to not breaking binary compatibility, at least as much as they reasonably can. Linus, as I mentioned, gets unreasonably angry with people on the mailing lists if they submit a kernel change that might break user space programs. Mac OS is less focused on the sort of constrained evolution backwards compatibility, and you will find that after some number of years, sufficiently old programs no longer run. And that's a choice, right? That's a design choice that says, listen, we can make a better operating system, or at least have less technical debt and legacy code and weird hacks in our operating system if we just over time drop support for things that we no longer wish to keep around. They can't do it completely arbitrarily. There's a fine line between deprecating the thing that was released very recently and maintaining backwards compatibility forever for one device owned by 3 people. And Mac OS tends much more towards the deprecation route, but other systems make other choices. But if you want an example of how obsessive operating system designers are, consider this example. Admittedly, it is now more than 25 years ago, about Windows 95, and yes, it's called Windows 95 as in like the year 1995. There's a quotation here that we've got in the notes, and Windows 95, no problem, nice new 32-bit API, but it still ran old 16-bit software, like the SimCity that you see here, perfectly. Microsoft obsessed about this, spending a big chunk of change testing every old program they could find with Windows 95. John Ross, who wrote the original version of SimCity for Windows 3.x, this was the predecessor to Windows 95, told me he accidentally left a bug in SimCity where he read memory he just freed. Yep, it worked fine on Windows 3.x because the memory never went anywhere. Here's the amazing part. On beta versions of Windows 95, SimCity wasn't working in testing. Microsoft tracked down the bug and added specific code to Windows 95 that looks for SimCity. If it finds SimCity running, it runs the memory allocator in a special mode that doesn't free memory right away. That's the kind of obsession with backward compatibility that made people willing to upgrade to Windows 95. Okay, so it makes for an interesting story. I'm not sure under the circumstances everybody would make the same decision, but I think it was interesting, right? They really wanted to get people to upgrade to Windows 95, and this is an era in which not many people had the internet, so you couldn't just get a patch for SimCity on next launch. So as we proceed, we're going to focus on Unix and Unix-like systems with some mention of Windows where appropriate. This is partly for time reasons, and Unix is what we're familiar with and what we're going to use on most of the servers run by the university, but we do acknowledge occasionally that other things exist. However, before we go on, there is one more thing that we want to talk about, and it is security now.